Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. By the time this video goes live, I'll probably be in Montreal for a little bit, so be sure to go by Gamers Co-op on Thursdays and La Bis on Sunday for me to possibly show up. This week we have another fine fellow from Philly who comes up, and this week Josh is playing his Tana and Tymna the Tongue-Tying Terrors, and keeps a hand with Pyroblast, Green Sun Zenith, Survival of the Fittest, Path of Ancestry, Misty Rainforest, Reflecting Pool, and Leonin Relic Warder. You can roll your eyes, cause I'm flying high with Derevi, and I keep a hand with Curse of Bounty, Celifid Coliseum, Hinterland Harbor, Sage of Fables, Enlightened Tutor, and Snapcaster Mage. Matt is playing the Dino Daddy and keeps Elemental Bond, Kadama's Reach, Urza's Incubator, Enlightened Tutor, Teferi's Protection, a Mountain, and Stomping Ground. And last but not least, Trevor is playing Yidris and keeps a hand with Search for Azcanta, Smoldering Marsh, Rites of Flourishing, Scalding Tarn, Blood Crypt, Phyrexian Metamorph, and Steam Vents. Josh wins the die roll and starts us off. Josh plays a Misty Rainforest, cracking it to find a land with a forest type, which will be Savannah, and casts a Green Sun Zenith where X is 0 to find Dryad Arbor. I play a tapped Hinterland Harbor, and Trevor says he'll kill the Arbor if it's the last thing he does this game. Matt plays a Stomping Ground and passes. Trevor plays a tapped Smoldering Marsh and passes. Josh plays a Path of Ancestry, which comes into play tapped, and passes. I play a Cephalid Coliseum and pass to Matt. Matt plays a Sunpetal Grove and casts Siegehorn Ceratops. Trevor plays a Steam Vents untapped, taking 2. He then casts Search for Azcanta and passes. Josh plays a Reflecting Pool and casts Tymna. He scries, and Trevor realizes that with partners, Path covers a lot of creature types. Josh then decides to get some value in with the Arbor since Trevor threatened it, and hits Trevor for 1. I draw a card and pass my turn. Matt plays a Mountain and swings the Ceratops at Trevor. He then casts Kadama's Reach and passes. Trevor looks at the top card and keeps it there, drawing it for his turn. He plays Exotic Orchard and casts Rites of Flourishing. Trevor then plays Temple of Epiphany as a second land for turn and scries. He keeps it on top and passes turn. Josh draws 2 and plays a Mana Confluence. He then swings Tymna at Matt for 2, gaining 2 life. He pays 1 and draws from the post-combat Tymna trigger. Josh then plays a Bloodstained Mire and casts Tana. He scries and keeps the card on top. Moving to his end step, he discards a land card. I draw 2 cards, none of which are lands, and I cast Curse of Bounty on Josh for showing off all of his sweet lands that I am lacking. I do take 1 from the Coliseum though, and I discard, passing to Matt. Matt plays a Forest for his turn and casts Urza's Incubator, naming dinosaurs. Trevor draws 2 and plays an untapped Blood Crypt, taking 2. He then casts Bribery, targeting Matt, and takes the library. Josh tries to mess with my curse though, and I tell him to respect my property, while Trevor settles on Sepulta and gives the deck back to Matt to shuffle, per the rules of the card. Trevor then plays a Scalding Tarn as his second land for turn, and I hate my deck a little. Josh plays a tapped Canopy Vista and drops Aura Shards. He then swings Tana at me for 2 damage, and gets 2 Saprolines, and he gets 2 Aura Shard triggers. He destroys my curse and Matt's Incubator. Josh then pays 1 life to draw with Tymna, and Trevor drops some cards as he's shuffling his deck after he cracks his Scalding Tarn to find a Breeding Pool. Josh then discards Leonin Relic Warder and passes to me. I draw 2 and finally hit my 3rd land, although it's colorless. I play Gavany Township and discard a card before passing to Matt. Matt casts a Kinjali Sunwing in his main phase and passes turn. Trevor draws 2 cards, as we all have, and casts Phyrexian Metamorph, taking 2 life as he only has to pay 3 mana. He has it enter as a copy of a tapped Tymna, and moves to combat. He swings Sepulta into Josh for 8 in the air. In his post-combat main phase, Trevor pays 1 life to draw from Tymna. Trevor then runs out a Mirage Mirror despite the Aura Shards on the board, and passes to Josh. I make a deal with Matt at this point not to attack him, as this side of the table seems to be causing us all the trouble anyway. Josh then draws 2 cards for his turn, and casts Sidar Kondo, scrying and bottoming the card. He then has his Aura Shards trigger blow up the newly cast Mirage Mirror. Moving to combat, Josh swings Tymna at me, and the 2 Saprolines at Matt. Matt blocks 1, as Sidar prevents him from stopping 1 with the Saprolines with the Ceratops, and takes 1 damage. Josh then gains 2 life, but pays it in his second main phase to draw 2 cards from Tymna's ability. Josh then plays a Verdant Catacombs, and moves to discard. For my turn, I draw 2 cards, and am immediately disappointed with all of my life choices that have led me to this moment. I did draw a land though, but it's a buddy land, and Glacial Fortress comes into play tapped. At the end of my turn, I discard a Venser, and I pass to Matt. Matt casts Enlightened Tutor at the end of my turn to find a card. Matt finds a Soul Ring and puts it on top. Matt draws his Soul Ring and another card for turn before he plays a Temple of Triumph, scrying the top card and keeping it there. He then casts a Soul Ring and brings out Carnage Tyrant. Trevor looks at the top card and keeps it there. He then draws 2, and Mike tells us that he hopes Matt wins as he heads home for the night. Trevor then moves to combat and swings Tymna at me and Zapalta at Matt. I take 2 and Matt takes 8. Trevor then pays 2 life in his post-combat main phase and draws 2 cards with Tymna. Trevor then plays Reliquary Tower and a Crumbling Necropolis before passing to Josh. Josh casts Survival of the Fittest, and I don't even hesitate to counter it with an Arcane Denial, taking 1 from the Colosseum. Josh tries to say that it's not that great, but come on Josh, this isn't my first rodeo. He then swings Tana at me for revenge, dealing another 2. This gives him 2 more Saprolines, but he doesn't use his Aura Shards trigger. He does pay 1 life to draw from Tymna, and plays a Snow-Covered Forest. Josh then casts Demonic Tutor, and goes to find a card, and passes to me. On my upkeep, Josh draws 2, and I draw 1. I then draw 2 for my turn, which isn't bad if only one of them had been a land that tapped for colors. Instead, I play a Reliquary Tower. I then take 1 from the Colosseum to cast Brainstorm, and hopefully find a second land. I don't, but I do hit a Soul Ring thankfully. I cast it, and I pass my turn. Matt plays an Unclaimed Territory for his land for turn, naming Dinosaurs. Matt then taps a stunning amount of mana, and the table holds its breath as we wait for Gishath. On the plus side, Matt doesn't cast his commander. On the downside, Sakama comes out, and suddenly holding our breath isn't enough. Matt then untaps his lands, and activates Sakama's second ability to blow up Aura Shards. Matt then casts Elemental Bond, and passes turn. At the end of turn, Trevor casts Stunt Double, and I don't really want him to have a copy of Sakama. I cast Snapcaster Mage with the creature on the stack, and target Arcane Denial. I then flashback Arcane Denial to counter the Stunt Double. On Trevor's upkeep, he draws 2 while I draw 1, then he draws 2 for turn. Trevor then plays an Island and a Verdant Catacombs, and casts a Dax Duplicant. Josh also doesn't want Trevor to get a Sakama, so he counters it with a Pyroblast. Trevor isn't phased though, and the 3rd time's the charm anyway, and Clever Impersonator, which unfortunately does resolve, comes in as a Sakama. With his clone Sakama's untap ability on the stack, Trevor sacrifices his Verdant Catacomb to find an overgrown tomb. He then untaps all of his lands. The only upside to this is that his Sakama comes into play tapped. Moving to combat, Trevor swings Zapalta at me for 8, and in his post-combat main phase, pays 1 life to draw a card from his clone Tymna. Trevor then kills the original Sakama with his clone Sakama, and passes to Josh. At the end of Trevor's turn, Josh casts Swords to Plowshares on the clone Sakama, and Trevor gains 9. On his own upkeep, Josh casts Enlightened Tutor to go and put Grave Pact on top. He then draws 2 cards for turn. Josh then plays an untapped Temple Garden, taking 2, and plays an Arid Mesa. He makes a point of telling me he drew both off of my Arcane Denial. Thanks, Josh. Josh then casts Grave Pact, taking 1 from Mana Confluence. Moving to combat, he swings Tana at me and the 3 Saprolines at Matt, and Tymna and Sidar at Trevor. Matt blocks one of the Saprolines, and Trevor blocks Tymna with Zapalta. This triggers Grave Pact twice, and most of the board gets cleared away. On my upkeep, I cast Enlightened Tutor to go and find Mystic Remora. I put it on top before drawing for my turn. I then cast it in my main phase, taking another one from the Colosseum, and I pass to Matt. Matt draws 2 for his turn and plays a Forest. He has more than enough to cast Gishath, and draws as his commander hits the field from the Elemental Bond. He then plays another Forest, and I wonder what it's like to have mana. Moving to combat, Matt swings the Carnage Tyrant and Gishath at Trevor for 14. With Gishath's trigger on the stack though, Josh is all too happy to flash in Containment Priest. Matt, true to form though, has unbelievable luck and reveals the top 7 cards, but only hits 1 dinosaur that gets exiled instead. For Trevor's turn, he looks at the top card with Search and puts it into his graveyard, flipping the enchantment to reveal Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. He then plays a Forest and Cinderglade as his land for turn. Trevor then does the table a favor and casts Blasphemous Act for only 1 red, not paying the extra 4 and allowing me to draw. Matt responds to the spell being on the stack by casting Teferi's Protection to save his board. Trevor responds to the protection by casting Dig Through Time. He keeps 2 cards and, not having found an answer, decides to cast Steam Augury. He doesn't pay the 4 extra for either of these, and I get to draw. Josh gives Trevor the pile with 3 cards, and Trevor then is left to cast Mystical Tutor, again not paying 4 and letting me draw. I'm pretty frustrated at this point, as so far none of them have been lands. Trevor finds Murderous Cut and puts it on top. Trevor then activates Azcanta and draws the Murderous Cut. and he has enough to cast it with the help of Delve to kill Gishath. The protection then resolves, and Matt is at least able to save his Carnage Tyrant. Josh draws for turn and plays a Kessig Wolfrun. He then casts a Deathrite Shaman and recasts Tana. With nothing else, he passes turn. I draw for turn and still can't find a land. I cast Recruiter of the Guard almost as much for the shuffle as it is for the tutor, and I go and find a card while Josh reminds me that I should have done a cumulative upkeep for the Remora. I pay the 1 now rather than let the enchantment die, and I find Elvish Mystic, putting it into my hand and then casting it before passing to Matt. Matt faces back in on his turn and draws 2. He then casts Cultivate and finds 2 basics, 1 for the hand and 1 for the field. He puts a mountain onto the field and a plains to his hand, playing it for turn. Matt then casts True Conviction and swings the Carnage Tyrant at Trevor. Trevor takes 14 and Matt gains 14 life. Trevor untaps for turn and draws 2. He plays 2 lands and casts Pernicious Deed. He doesn't pay the extra 4 and I remember to draw from it. Trevor then pops the deed and I cast Stifle, taking 1 from the Colosseum. Trevor activates his Azcanta and cracks his Polluted Delta to find a Sunken Hollow before resolving his land's ability. He unfortunately reveals 3 lands and a Chromatic Lantern. At the end of Trevor's turn, Josh super cracks as he puts it and takes 3 life as he sacrifices his 3 fetch lands to find 3 lands. Josh draws for turn and plays a Rootbound Crag. Moving to combat, Josh swings Tana and me and activates Kessig Wolfrun to give Tana +6/+0 and trample. He gets 8 Saprolanes. In his second main phase, he activates his Deathrite Shaman, exiling his own Nature's Claim from his graveyard to deal 2 to the table. At this point, Trevor's got a pretty suboptimal hand, and it's 11:30 at night, so he asks if anyone minds if he heads home for the night, and we all say it's fine, and he scoops it up. On my upkeep, I let the Mystic Remora die, and only draw 1 for my turn. Josh lets me know that my Colosseum is active, and I cast Edric. I then move to combat and swing the Mystic and the Recruiter at Matt for 2. I draw 2 cards from Edric, neither of which are lands. I then pass turn. Matt casts a Majestic Helioteris in his main phase, and brings out Iris. Moving to combat, he swings his Carnage Tyrant at me, and I die after the first hit. Matt gains 7 life, and in his second main phase, he drops Asceticism so Josh can't mess with his stuff, and passes turn. Josh untaps and heads straight for the jugular, swinging Tana and her army of 8 Saprolines at Matt. Matt decides to just take the 10, and Josh gains 2 more Saproline tokens. In his second main phase, he casts Birds of Paradise and passes turn. Matt untaps and plays Temple of Abandon. He scries and keeps it on top. He then recasts Gishath and draws as he enters. Matt then casts Insult and moves to combat. He swings his commander and the Majestic at Josh, giving his commander flying. Before moving to blockers though, Josh pays 4 mana, or more importantly 3 green and X, where X is 1, to cast Court of Calling, and he goes into his library to find Viscera Seer. Josh then sacrifices a Sapling to Scry, and Matt has to sacrifice Carnage Tyrant to Grave Pact. Josh then sacrifices a second one, and Scry's keeping it on top, while Matt sacrifices the Majestic. Josh then sacrifices a third, leaving the card on top again, and Matt sacrifices his commander. With nothing else, Matt passes turn. Josh untaps for his turn and goes straight to combat. 7 Saprolines and Tana trample towards Matt, and before damage is done, Josh activates Kessig Wolfrun to give Tana an additional +6/+0 and trample. This gives Josh another 8 Saproline tokens, and he passes to Matt. Matt casts Kindred Boon in his main phase, naming Dinosaurs. He then drops Itali, drawing a card from the Elemental Bond. Matt then plays Temple of Plenty, scrying a card and bottoming it. He passes, but at the end of Matt's turn, Josh sacrifices a Saproline to scry and force Matt to sacrifice a creature. Matt sacrifices Itali, and we move to Josh's turn. Josh then untaps, and we realize that Iros is active, so he sacrifices another Saproline to scry before drawing. Josh then plays Phyrexian Tower, and again moves to combat. He swings everything at Matt, and pumps for lethal with Kessig Wolfrun. Game review time. So, this is probably my first time ever seeing a Tana and Tymna deck, and I gotta say, I really like Tymna. I know I'm a bit late to the party, but my goodness does she draw a lot of cards for people who have her on the board. Josh's deck was just the right amount of aggressive and defensive and allowed him to really control the board, and he was able to draw so many cards that even after a couple board wipes, he really was able to recover easily. It was great being able to meet Josh, and even better to be able to play against him, so if people are in the area, don't be afraid to message me to try and see if we can get you in a game. Matt's Dino deck is relevant as always, and I find it comes down to basically whether or not Matt's able to get Gishath out early enough and basically put a ton of pressure on the board. In the case of this game, I think he was set back several times and had to invest more resources into killing me rather than Josh. This allowed Josh to basically sneak under with Grave Pact and then get Viscera Seer and a sack outlet, denying Matt the ability to ever basically have creatures again. This game was probably the worst performance by my Derevi deck since I made it, and typically it goes a lot faster and wins a lot easier. But, as with everything in a singleton format, things can happen, and sometimes you just get unlucky and don't draw lands. I had to mulligan down to 6, which didn't help, and even though I drew a bunch of cards, I still could not find a land. And lastly, Trevor's Yidris deck is always a pleasure to play against because it never plays the same way twice. He always is able to find new creatures, clone new creatures, steal new things. It's really fun to have a deck that's super reactive to what other people are playing. I think if you're looking to build a deck that doesn't play linearly, this is probably the kind of style you want. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.